He saved the child, but never expected to see her there. The little girl was drowning. And the man who jumped in to save her had no idea that doing so would destroy every lie he'd spent 3 years building. Marcus Reed didn't think twice. He dropped his coffee, kicked off his shoes, and dove into the fountain at Riverside Park in Atlanta, Georgia, on a Tuesday afternoon that should have been completely ordinary. The child, maybe 4 years old, her tiny arms slapping the water in blind panic, was pulled to safety in under a minute. People on the sidewalk clapped. Someone filmed it on their phone. Marcus barely noticed. He was on his knees on the wet concrete, making sure the little girl was breathing, when he heard a voice that stopped his heart completely. "Oh my God, Emma." He looked up. And the world tilted. Standing there, soaking wet from running through the sprinklers to reach her daughter, was Diane. His Diane. The woman he had told his current girlfriend, Rachel, was just an old coworker. The woman he had quietly, deliberately erased from his life 3 years ago. The woman he had left without a single honest explanation, just a text message and a packed bag while she was at work. Diane looked exactly the same. Maybe more tired around the eyes. Definitely thinner. But still the most beautiful woman Marcus had ever known, and that knowledge hit him like a fist to the chest. She froze when she saw his face. For 3 full seconds, neither of them moved. Then Diane grabbed her daughter from his arms and held the child so tight that little Emma let out a small, confused cry. "It's okay, baby," Diane whispered, her voice cracking. "Mama's here." Marcus stood there dripping on the pavement while strangers congratulated him and moved on. Diane stayed. She had no choice, Emma was still shaking, and Marcus was the only reason her daughter was alive. "Thank you," she said finally. Her voice was flat. Controlled. The voice of a woman who had learned the hard way how to keep herself together. "Diane. Don't." She looked at Emma's face instead of his. "Just, thank you. That's all." But Marcus couldn't leave. Something held his feet to the ground. Maybe guilt. Maybe something older and deeper that he'd spent 3 years trying to smother. "How old is she?" he asked. Diane's jaw tightened. 3.5. The air went out of his lungs. He did the math. He didn't want to. But he did it anyway, standing there in wet clothes in the middle of Atlanta, and the numbers didn't lie. "Diane." His voice dropped to almost nothing. "Is she mine?" Diane finally looked at him. Her eyes were red, not from crying, from the effort of not crying. From years of practice. "You left," she said quietly. "You decided she wasn't going to be yours before she was even born." The truth came out slowly, piece by painful piece, on a park bench while Emma fell asleep between them, exhausted and wrapped in a stranger's donated jacket. Diane had found out she was pregnant 2 weeks before Marcus disappeared. She had been building up the courage to tell him when she came home to find half the apartment empty and a text on her phone that said, "I'm sorry. I can't do this anymore. Please don't call me." She had called him anyway. 47 times over 2 weeks. He never answered. She assumed he knew. She assumed he had run because he knew. That some part of him had sensed what was coming and chosen to escape before responsibility could find him. She was wrong. Marcus had left for a completely different, far more selfish reason, one that had been eating him alive ever since. He had met Rachel. His boss's daughter. Beautiful, wealthy, connected. He had convinced himself he was in love. The truth, which he could finally admit sitting on this bench next to the woman he had actually loved, was that he had been in love with the idea of escaping his own struggling life. Rachel represented a door out of debt, out of his dead-end accounting job, out of everything he'd been quietly ashamed of. He had traded Diane for a promotion and a penthouse apartment. And he had never known about Emma. "I would have stayed," he said. His voice was wrecked. "Diane, if I'd known." "You don't get to say that." Her voice was gentle but firm. You made your choice before you knew. That choice tells me everything about who you were. He had no answer for that. Because she was right. What happened next was the twist that Marcus never saw coming. 3 weeks later, Rachel called him into her father's office, a corner suite on the 42nd floor of a glass tower in Midtown Atlanta. Her father, Gerald Cole, CEO of Cole Financial Group and Marcus's boss for 6 years, sat behind his desk with an expression carved from stone. Rachel stood beside him, and she wasn't crying. She looked almost relieved. We know about the girl, Gerald said simply. Marcus went cold. Excuse me. Emma Reed. Gerald folded his hands. The child you pulled from the fountain. The DNA test you requested last week. He paused. Did you think we wouldn't find out? You used the company's health insurance portal to contact the lab. Marcus had thought it was private. He'd been wrong about that too. Rachel spoke then, and her voice held no anger, only a quiet, devastating honesty that Marcus hadn't expected from her. I knew about Diane before I knew about Emma. I knew you left her for me. I told myself it was just bad timing, that people move on. She stopped. But a child is different, Marcus. A child is different. She handed him an envelope. Inside was a resignation letter, already printed with his name on it. My father is letting you resign instead of terminating you, she said. For what it's worth, I think you should go be a father. I genuinely do. That's not sarcasm. It's the most honest thing I've ever said to you. She walked out of the office without looking back. And for the second time in his life, Marcus stood in a room watching a door close behind someone he had wronged. He signed the letter. He called Diane that night from a parking garage, sitting in his car because he couldn't trust himself to drive. She didn't answer. He left a voicemail that lasted 6 minutes and said almost nothing useful except, I'm sorry. I know that's not enough. I know I don't deserve anything. But Emma deserves to know her father exists, if you'll ever allow that. I'll do whatever you need. I'll wait as long as it takes. Diane listened to that voicemail 4 times. She didn't call back that night. Or the next day. But 2 weeks later, she sent a single text. Saturday at 10. Centennial Park. Emma likes the butterfly garden. Don't be late. He wasn't late. He showed up 12 minutes early with a stuffed elephant because he didn't know what 3-year-olds liked and an employee at Walgreens had told him elephants were safe. He stood at the entrance to the butterfly garden with his heart in his throat, watching the gate. When Diane arrived, Emma was holding her hand and wearing a yellow raincoat even though the sky was perfectly clear. Emma looked at Marcus with enormous brown eyes, his eyes, undeniably, unmistakably his, and said with complete seriousness, Are you the man who got wet? Marcus laughed. The kind of laugh that comes out when crying would be more honest. Yeah, he said, crouching down to her level. That's me. Mama said you saved me. Emma considered this carefully. That was good. I'm going to try to keep doing good, he told her. For a really long time. If that's okay with you. Emma thought about it for 3 full seconds. Then she held out the stuffed frog she was carrying, a generous, total trust gift from a child who didn't yet know how rare that kind of trust was, and offered it to him. He took it with both hands like it was something sacred. Life doesn't give you do-overs. But sometimes, if you're honest enough, humble enough, and just lucky enough, it gives you a beginning that looks a lot like one. Don't wait for a drowning moment to become the person you were supposed to be.